We want to help you prevent youth suicide.
Many suicides can be prevented, but this requires attention and action.
Silence is never the answer.
Students are the most underutilized resource in schools for suicide prevention.
School staff, we need your help and support. We're stronger when we work together to help each other.
Hey, this is Reverend Liz Walker. Let's get her help with this.
Did you know that social connectedness in school reduces the risk of adolescent suicide? Research confirms that when a child perceives an important adult cares about them, it significantly lowers the risk of suicide. This is good news. Caring adults who have contact with students who are at risk of suicide can save a life. In this module, you will meet individuals you can partner with to prevent youth suicide. Remember, there is a role for all of us in preventing youth suicides.
Suicide prevention is everyone's business.
My name is Sasha Restrepo. I graduated Newton South in 2014. Last year in Newton, we had 3 suicides occur. It shook me up very personally, and simply because I've had my own journey with struggling with mental illness in my family, with myself. Why I think it's so important is because I know that students every day go down the hallway dealing with problems. You feel crappy, and there's your math teacher talking to you about fractions, and you're just like, I could care less about what happened and how to do this. I'm worried about what's going on. But you can't say, I don't want to listen to you, I'm worried about this. You have to sit there and smile and try to understand. Whereas someone who has a cold and is sneezing, or someone who has a cast and broke their arm last week, will have an excuse and will speak up and say, I want to go to the nurse's office, or excuse me, I don't feel well, or will be excused, and everyone's like, oh, I understand, she's sick, you know? But depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, these are all illnesses. It's not like a cold, but just because you can't see it, it doesn't mean it's not there, and it doesn't mean the person's not suffering.
As a school administrator, I'm all too aware of the challenges we as educators face in providing a safe learning environment for our students. Of course, we have protocols for all types of traumatic events, like fire drills and lockdowns. But it is equally important to recognize that there are students who are at risk for suicide at every school. So we need similar procedures and policies, and commitment to youth suicide prevention and response. The goal here is to ensure that anyone who interacts with students, no matter how informal or unstructured, they will know how to identify kids who may be at risk of suicide or depression, and know who to contact to get help for these students.
Suicide prevention is extremely important to me, both in my role as an educator and also in my role as a parent. As an educator, I take very seriously that parents trust their child's well-being to us as educators to do the best we can to prepare them to have happy and successful lives. As a parent of 3 children, the youngest of which is a gay male who attempted suicide as a sophomore in high school, I guess the work that I do in schools really took on a different meaning for me. As an administrator, I've always, and as a teacher, I've always worked as hard as I could to create for children an atmosphere that is welcoming, accepting, and supportive. To me, that's the most important thing. Everything else comes after we create that learning environment. All kids have to feel safe, welcome, and accepted.
Hello, my name is Michelle Fagnano, and I am the Director of Prevention Services at Massachusetts Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children, MSPCC. Through my professional and personal experiences, I have come to understand there are many significant facts that impact teen suicide. Many suicides can be prevented but require attention and action. Suicide is not a single event that impacts only the teen. Its pain reaches far into the family, schools, friends, and the community at large.
Hi, I'm Chris Hayden, pastor of Trinity Covenant Church in Lexington. Churches and other religious communities are often uniquely poised to help prevent teen suicide and other issues that affect the health and safety of young people. Whereas teachers, coaches, counselors, and other social services often deal primarily with individual teens, churches are regularly involved with the whole family system, from children to parents and grandparents. Pastors and other religious leaders are often intimately involved with families or with others in their congregations who are deeply connected spiritually, emotionally, and socially with those families. Youth pastors and their religious counterparts play a specifically critical role. They are personally involved in trusting relationships with teenagers and often have an intimate knowledge of the emotional and social life of teens, including depression, substance abuse, troubled behaviors, relational issues, and so forth, and can intervene before stresses become crises or crises become dangerous. Although we share concerns to keep our religious and secular institutions separate, we can foster collaboration in our communities between educational institutions, social service agencies, and religious communities by greater awareness and cooperation that can be engendered by intentional communication between these leaders, by educating congregations about teen suicide and other issues, and by fostering positive partnerships between schools and religious communities.
Partnering with your community's mental health agencies is an important tool in preventing youth suicide. Engagement with clinical supports can be a strong protective factor against suicidal thoughts and behaviors, and directing students and their families to the mental health agencies that serve your area is a role that school staff can play in making that connection. Many districts collaborate with outside mental health agencies to provide school-based therapy for their students. These therapists are an important part of the school team that helps to support individual students throughout the academic year, but they can also be a valuable resource for consultation when you recognize concerns about a student who may not already be engaged with mental health services. Additionally, every city and town in Massachusetts is covered by an emergency services program that can provide mental health crisis evaluation and intervention for students and their families. These interventions can take place in the community, including at your school, and provide a way to assess a student's needs and connect them to appropriate supports. Emergency services programs can also proactively work with school staff and families to create individualized crisis plans for students, which can be used as a guideline for how to respond if and when a student experiences a mental health crisis in the future.
My name's Commissioner Joseph Conant from the Springfield, Mass. Fire Department. The subject of suicide awareness and prevention is very important to me because my father died by suicide. Going to suicide calls on the fire department is very high stress, especially when there's children involved. Back many years ago, we had a very high profile student suicide in Springfield. The child's name was Carl Walker Hoover, and he was 11 years old. I was the chief on duty that night, and one of my engine companies responded to that. And I recently talked to one of the young men that was on that call, and he stated that in his time on the job, that was probably the toughest call he's ever been on. He said to me that on the way back from that call, it was the quietest he's ever heard inside of a truck. Nobody spoke, nobody talked. So they're very tough calls for firefighters to respond to. We'd like to see them end so we don't have to respond to any of those calls ever again.